Hello, welcome to the course of computer network. So today we are going to discuss about the client and server model. So in this chapter we are going to discuss about various things like connectionless and connection oriented services. Next we will discuss about the client server model and the softwares. Then we will discuss about how client identify the server. Then we will discuss about the various terminologies like concurrent server, P2P network, and then the difference between the P2P network and client server network. So let's start with the very first. We will discuss about the difference between the connectionless services and the connection oriented services. So here in connectionless services, the packets are sent without establishing a connection, whereas in connection oriented services, the connection is established between the sender and receiver, and after that the data is transferred over to this particular connection. And here in connectionless services, the packets are numbered at sender and reassembled at the destination. It means each packet will give a number, defined number, and after that when it reach at the destination, these packets are reassembled. Whereas in connection oriented services, here the connection will terminated after the data transfer and there is no need of adding any number at the sender because the packets are receiving and at the destination in sequence. Here the in connectionless services, the packet may be delayed, lost or arrive out of sequence, whereas in connection oriented services there is no delay or loss of any packet in the network. So here in connectionless services, the example of it is UDP, that is user datagram protocol, and in connection oriented services it use protocol like TCP, transmission control protocol, and SCTP, that is stream control transmission protocol. So this is about the connectionless services and connection oriented services. The next one is client classification and the server classification. So here, and first of all, the client start after the servers come in the communication, whereas the server start first during the communication. So here it is telling which part of the communication will start first, like the server will start first and after that the client will start in the communication. So here in client classification, it knows to which server it wants to contact, means the clients know to which server it want to connect, whereas server doesn't know which client is going to contact it. And here in client, it initiates the contact whenever there is a need of communication, whereas in server, the server wait passively for the client contact. Here first of all, the client will start after the server starts in the communication, but client will initiate the contact, whereas server will wait for the client contact. The next is in client classification, it communicate with the server by sending and receiving data, whereas server classification, it communicate with the client by sending and receiving data similarly. And here the client may terminate after interacting with the server, but server will stay online after serving one client and waiting for the another. So this is the client and the server classification. The next, let's discuss about the client software. So client consists of a various application program like Chrome or the Chrome browser, or it also contain the Gmail, etc. So here the client becomes a client temporarily whenever remote access is needed. So it runs locally on a user computer or the device, and it actively initiate contact with a server, and it can access various services but can contact one remote server at a time, and it doesn't require powerful hardware. Whereas at server software, here the server consists of a special purpose and privileged program. It is invoked automatically whenever a system boots and continue to execute through many sessions. So it runs on a dedicated computer system. It waits for contact from the different remote clients, and it requires powerful hardware and operating system. And it can accept connection from many clients at the same time, but only offer services to only one client at a time. Next is client server characteristics. Here the client runs on a standard computer, whereas the server runs on a server class computer. Here the information can flow in either direction, like from both direction between a client and the server. And here the client sends a request to the server for communication and server sends the response for the request. So next a question arises, how client identify a server. So here the internet protocol divides identification into two pieces. The first one is an identifier that specifies the computer on which a server runs, and an identifier that specifies a particular service on a computer. So for identifying a computer, here each computer in the internet is assigned with a unique identifier known as internet protocol address, that is IP address. So whenever it contacts a server, a client specifies the server IP address, and to make server identification easy, each computer is also assigned with a name and the domain name system, which is used to translate a name into an address. So here a user specifies a name such as www.telecomandtraining.com and rather than defining its IP address. Whereas for identifying a services, here each service available in the internet is assigned with a unique 16-bit identifier known as protocol port number. And for example, like for email, the port number is 25, and for World Wide Web, the port number is 80. So in this way, they identify the server. Like for identifying the specific computer, it uses the IP addresses, and for identifying the particular services, it uses the port number. Next is concurrent services. Here a concurrent server uses thread of execution to handle requests from a multiple client at the same time. So it means a client doesn't have to wait for a previous client to finish. So concurrent server code is divided into two pieces. First one is main program, that is thread, and second one is handler. So the main program accepts contact from a client and create a thread of control to handle the client. Here each thread of control interact with a single client and run the handler code. So in second part, in handler, after handling one client, the thread terminates, and meanwhile the main thread keeps the server alive. So in this way, the concurrent server serves the various multiple clients at a same time. The next one is P2P network, that is peer-to-peer network. So here in peer-to-peer network, the peers are computer systems which are connected to each other through the internet. And here the files are shared directly between systems on the network without using central server. So in the other word, in P2P, each computer on a P2P network become a file server as well as a client. And here the only requirement for a computer to join a peer-to-peer network is that internet connection and peer-to-peer software. So the common peer-to-peer software programs are Casa, LimeWire, BearShare, etc. The next is difference between client-server network and peer-to-peer network. So here in client-server network, it is designed for the end user called client and to access resources from a central computer called server. Whereas in peer-to-peer network, it is created by connecting two or more computers and they share their resources with each other in the network. Here in client-server network, here the server is centralized and a powerful computer, whereas in peer-to-peer network, each computer will act as a server and a client. Here in client server, the server's role purpose is to serve its client with a different application like for sharing files, songs, video collections or some other services. Whereas in peer-to-peer network, this network is less expensive as compared to the client server network. So this is a difference in client server diagram of client server network and peer-to-peer network. So here this is a server, centralized powerful server that is connected to the different client. Whereas in peer-to-peer network, these all client server computers are connected with each other and they are interconnected also. So there is no centralized server, but here there is a centralized server. Next is terminology, that is socket API, that is application programming interface. So it is an interface of an application which is used to specify internet communication. An application creates a socket for internet communication, and the operating system return a small integer descriptor that identify the socket. So here the first of all, the internet communication, here the application will create socket for internet communication, and operating system will return a small integer known as descriptor for identifying the socket. In many operating systems, socket descriptors are integrated with other input output descriptor for read and write operation. So here the API is available for many operating systems such as Microsoft Windows system, Apple operating system X, Android, Unix, and as well as Linux. So this is all about the client server model. Thank you.